The most powerful man in the city fell to his knees in a small restaurant on a Tuesday night. And the only person brave enough to save him was a waitress who couldn't afford her rent. That's how this story begins. Not with gunfire, not with money, not with power, but with one woman's refusal to let a stranger die, even when that stranger was a man the whole city feared. The king without a kingdom. His name was Victor Antonov. In certain neighborhoods, people didn't speak his name out loud. They whispered it. They crossed the street when his black cars passed. They lowered their eyes when his men entered their shops. Victor controlled half the city's ports. His organization moved money through businesses that looked clean on paper but carried the weight of decades of blood and silence. Politicians knew his face. Police captains knew his voice. And everyone who worked for him knew one simple rule: never show weakness. Victor learned this rule when he was 19 years old, standing in a cold warehouse, watching his father bleed out on concrete floor. His father had been a powerful man too, a man who built an empire from nothing, a man who trusted the wrong people. The men who killed him were once his closest friends. Victor watched his father reach for him, watched the life drain from his eyes, and made a promise that night. He would never trust anyone. He would never love anyone. And he would never, ever let anyone see him fall. For 23 years, he kept that promise. He built his father's crumbling organization into something bigger, stronger, more feared. He married once. A woman named Irina who was beautiful and ambitious. She gave him a son. Then she gave his secrets to his enemies for money and disappeared to another country with a man who promised her a cleaner life. His son was 4 years old when she left. Victor raised the boy alone. He sent him to the best schools, far from the city, far from the blood. He visited when he could, which was never enough. He watched his son grow into a young man who looked at him with distant eyes, respectful but cold. The boy knew what his father was, and Victor couldn't blame him for keeping distance. Now, at 52 years old, Victor had everything a man could want. Money, power, respect, and nothing that made life worth living. He slept alone in a mansion with 17 rooms. He ate alone in restaurants that cleared tables whenever he arrived. He sat alone in the back of cars driven by men who would kill for him but never laugh with him. The loneliness had become so familiar that he stopped noticing it. Like a dull ache in an old injury. Like a scar that stopped hurting but never healed. That Tuesday night, Victor had come to Romano's, a small Italian restaurant near the waterfront, because he was tired. Tired of boardrooms. Tired of threats. Tired of counting enemies. He just wanted to sit somewhere quiet and eat something that reminded him of simpler days. 3 of his men sat at nearby tables. The owner personally served his food. The other customers pretended not to notice him. Victor ate alone. He always ate alone. Then the pain came. The fall. It started as pressure. A tightness in his chest that he dismissed as stress. But then it spread. Down his left arm. Up into his jaw. Crushing his ribs like a fist closing around his heart. Victor gripped the edge of the table. His fork clattered to the plate. "Boss!" One of his men noticed immediately, rising from his chair. Victor tried to speak, but the pain stole his breath. Sweat broke across his forehead. His vision blurred. Then he fell. His knees hit the floor. His hand clutched his chest. A groan escaped his lips, a sound he hadn't made in decades. The restaurant erupted in controlled chaos. His men surrounded him instantly. Marco, his most trusted guard, knelt beside him, face tight with fear. "We need to get you to a hospital. Now." Victor grabbed Marco's collar and pulled him close. No hospital, he growled through gritted teeth. Boss, you're having a heart attack. I said no. Victor's voice echoed through the restaurant, silencing everyone. Even in agony, his authority was absolute. He knew what a hospital meant. Doctors asking questions. Records being created. Word spreading through the city like fire. Victor Antonoff is weak. Victor Antonoff is dying. His enemies were always watching. The Kowalski family in the east. The Mendez organization in the south. A dozen smaller crews waiting for any sign of vulnerability. If they learned he was sick, they would strike. Not just at him, at everything he controlled. His men. His businesses. His son. Get me to the car, Victor ordered. Take me home. Call Dr. Petrov. Dr. Petrov is in Geneva for a conference, Marco said desperately. Boss, please. Then find another doctor. A private one. There's no time. Victor's vision was darkening at the edges. He could feel his heart stuttering, fighting, failing. Maybe this is it, he thought. Maybe this is how it ends. Not with a bullet. Not with betrayal. But alone. On the floor of a restaurant. Surrounded by men who feared him but didn't love him. Nobody in this room will cry at my funeral. It was a cold thought. A true thought. Then he heard her voice. The waitress. Move. All of you. Move. The voice was firm, clear, and completely unafraid. Victor looked up through his fading vision and saw a woman pushing through his bodyguards. She was small, maybe 5'3", wearing the restaurant's simple black uniform. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Her eyes were fierce. She dropped to her knees beside him. Sir, look at me. Victor tried to focus on her face. He'd never seen her before. Just another server, invisible in the background of his carefully controlled world. You're having a cardiac event, she said calmly. You need emergency care. Not tomorrow. Not in an hour. Now. Marco stepped forward. Miss, step away. I'm a nursing student, she shot back without looking at him. I know what I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing is a man who will die in this restaurant if someone doesn't act. She looked directly into Victor's eyes. I don't know who you are. I don't care what you've done. You are a human being and you are dying. Will you let me help you? Victor stared at her. In 23 years, nobody had spoken to him like that. Nobody had looked at him like that. Not with fear, not with greed, not with hidden agenda. Just honest, stubborn, furious compassion. My enemies, he started, will still be there tomorrow if you survive, she interrupted. They won't matter at all if you don't. She stood and turned to his men. There's a private clinic 12 minutes from here. Dr. Yolanda Chen. She's discreet. She treats patients who can't go to regular hospitals. I worked there before this job. She grabbed her phone from her apron. I'm calling ahead. You, she pointed at Marco. Carry him to the car. You drive. I'll sit with him and keep him stable. She was already dialing before anyone could argue. Marco looked at Victor, waiting for an order. Victor looked at this small woman who had just commanded his men like she'd been doing it her whole life. Do what she says, he whispered. Then the darkness took him. The girl who couldn't look away. Her name was Maya Torres. She was 27 years old. She worked 3 jobs. She was 2 semesters away from finishing her nursing degree. And she was so far behind on her rent that she'd been sleeping on her cousin's couch for the past month. Maya had learned early that the world was not kind. Her mother raised 3 children alone, working double shifts at a factory until her body gave out. Her brother died of an overdose at 21 because they couldn't afford proper treatment. Her sister married young and moved away and stopped calling. Maya had seen enough pain to last a lifetime. But she'd also seen enough to know that pain was not a choice, only the response to it was. She could have looked away when Victor Antonov collapsed. She could have stayed frozen like everyone else, waiting for someone more important to make a decision. But Maya Torres was not built for looking away, so she stepped forward. And she saved the life of a man whose hands were stained with decades of darkness. The clinic. Dr. Yolanda Chen asked no questions. That was why certain people used her clinic. A clean, quiet facility hidden behind a flower shop in a neighborhood most people forgot existed. Victor was rushed into surgery. A stent was placed in his blocked artery. His heart was stabilized. Maya sat in the waiting room for 6 hours. She didn't know why she stayed. Her shift had ended. Her boss had told her to go home. Marco had offered her money, a thick envelope that she pushed back into his hands without counting. "I don't want payment," she said. Marco looked confused. In his world, everyone wanted payment. "Then why did you help?" Maya looked at him with tired eyes. "Because someone should." When Victor woke, she was still there. He turned his head and saw her sitting in a plastic chair, reading a worn textbook on cardiac care. "You're still here," he said, his voice rough. She looked up. "Someone had to make sure you didn't try to escape." A small smile. "You seem like the type." Victor almost laughed. He couldn't remember the last time someone made him almost laugh. The days after, Victor stayed at the clinic for 3 days. Maya visited every day after her shifts. She brought him soup from the restaurant because the clinic's food was terrible. She quizzed him on his medications, made sure he understood the follow-up care, lectured him about stress and diet and sleep. She treated him like a patient, not like a king. "You're very annoying," Victor told her on the second day. "And you're very bad at taking care of yourself," she replied. "So we're even." Victor learned pieces of her life through small conversations. Her mother's illness, her brother's death, her stubborn refusal to give up on her nursing degree despite working herself to exhaustion. She never asked about his life. "You don't want to know who I am?" he asked finally. "I know who you are," Maya said quietly. "Everyone in this city knows who you are. And you helped me anyway." She met his eyes. "Kindness isn't something you earn, Mr. Antonov. It's something you give. What people do with it is their choice. What I do with it is mine." Victor had no response to that. He had lived his entire life believing that everything had a price. That kindness was weakness. That love was a vulnerability to be exploited. This woman made no sense to him, and he couldn't stop thinking about her. The threat. The word got out anyway. Victor didn't know how. Perhaps a nurse at the clinic talked. Perhaps one of his own men whispered to the wrong person. Perhaps his enemies had been watching closer than he thought. But 3 weeks after his heart attack, Maya opened her apartment door to find 2 men waiting in her hallway. They didn't hurt her. They delivered a message. "Victor Antonov has a weakness now, and we know her name." That night, Victor received photographs. Maya at the restaurant. Maya walking home. Maya visiting her mother at the care facility. And a note. "Back off the harbor negotiations, or the girl pays for your heart." Victor sat alone in his study, looking at the photographs. He should walk away. He'd only known Maya for weeks. She was a stranger, a kind stranger, an extraordinary stranger, but a stranger still. If he continued seeing her, she would never be safe. His world would swallow her whole. But if he walked away, she would still be in danger. His enemies would use her regardless. That was how the game was played. Victor made a phone call. "Find out who sent this," he told Marco. And bring Maya Torres here. Tonight. The choice. Maya arrived at Victor's mansion with fear in her eyes for the first time. Not fear of him. Fear of what she'd seen in those men's faces. Fear of a world she'd always known existed but never touched. Victor showed her the photographs. "I'm sorry," he said. "You saved my life, and I've endangered yours." Maya was silent for a long moment. "What happens now?" she asked. "I can send you away. New city, new name, enough money to finish your degree and start over. And my mother? My patients? My life?" Victor had no answer. Maya stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "You know what I learned working in that restaurant? Watching people." She turned to face him. "The people who come in rich and powerful, they're usually the loneliest ones. They eat their expensive meals alone. They never look servers in the eye. They're surrounded by people who want things from them, but nobody who wants them." She stepped closer to Victor. "You're one of the loneliest people I've ever seen, Mr. Antonoff. And I think you've been lonely so long you don't even feel it anymore." Victor's jaw tightened. "That's not an answer to my question." "Here's my answer," Maya said. "I'm not running. I'm not hiding. And I'm not leaving you to fight alone. You don't owe me anything. This isn't about debt." Maya's voice cracked. "It's about choice. I chose to help you that night because I believed, still believe, that every person deserves a chance at redemption. Even you." Tears formed in her eyes. "If I run, I become someone who only shows kindness when it's safe. That's not kindness. That's just performance." Victor looked at this small, stubborn, impossibly brave woman, and something cracked inside him. Something that had been frozen for 23 years. The reckoning. The threat came from the Kowalski family, old enemies who had been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. Victor didn't respond with violence. For the first time in his life, he chose differently. He called a meeting. He sat across from Elena Kowalski, the family's matriarch, and laid out documents that could destroy her organization. Evidence he'd collected over decades, waiting for the right moment. But he didn't use them as a weapon. He used them as a bridge. "I'm tired," Victor said. "Tired of watching. Tired of waiting. Tired of building a kingdom that means nothing." He pushed the documents across the table. "Take these. Destroy them. I don't care anymore. I want peace." Elena Kowalski stared at him. "What's your price?" "One woman's safety. That's all. Touch her, and everything I've ever gathered on your family goes to the federal prosecutor. Leave her alone, and we end this war today." Elena studied him for a long moment. "You're doing this for a waitress?" Victor met her eyes. "I'm doing this because a waitress reminded me that power without purpose is just a slow death." The deal was made. The quiet after. 6 months later, Victor sat in a small hospital room. Maya had just graduated, top of her class. She was starting her first job as a registered nurse at a community clinic in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. Victor had funded the clinic's renovation. Not with his name attached, he knew better. But the money was his, and the new cardiac wing existed because a waitress had once reminded him that kindness wasn't earned. His son had visited last month. For the first time in years, they'd sat together and talked. Not about business, not about legacy, but about small things. Food, books, memories of a mother who had failed them both. His son had looked at him with something new in his eyes. Not warmth exactly, not forgiveness, but curiosity. A beginning. Victor's phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "Finished my first shift. Lost 1 patient. Saved 3. cried in the supply closet for 10 minutes. Now eating very bad cafeteria food. How's your day? Victor smiled. Actually smiled. He typed back, better now. There is a small Italian restaurant near the waterfront where, once a week, a powerful man sits at a corner table and waits. He doesn't clear the room anymore. He doesn't hide in shadows. He just waits. And when a small woman in scrubs walks through the door, tired from a 12-hour shift but smiling anyway, the man stands. He pulls out her chair. He asks about her day. He listens. The other diners sometimes stare. They still know his name. They still know his reputation. But they also see something they don't expect. They see a man who laughs. A man who reaches across the table to hold a woman's hand. A man who looks at her like she's the only person in the world. Victor Antonoff spent 40 years believing that love was weakness. That trust was a weapon others would use against him. That kindness was a door he couldn't afford to open. But one night, a waitress opened that door anyway. She didn't ask permission. She didn't count the cost. She just stepped forward, when everyone else stepped back, and said, "Let me help you." And that was enough. That was everything. Some people change the world with power. Others change it with a single act of courage. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most powerful man in the room is the one brave enough to be saved.